Okay, welcome everybody to a spring restorative kitchen. Hopefully you've had a good winter and ready to wake up into a more lively time of the year. And today we're going to experiment with condiments. And the reason I love condiments is because it dresses everything up. We can take the same kind of boring, bland chicken, we can take the same kinds of vegetables and the same rice and pastas, and we can really make them sing with special flavoring ingredients. And the best part about this is we're constantly adding more vegetables and adding more flavor, and we're kind of bringing down the protein area so we don't have to deal with quite so much meat in order to make a healthy and delicious meal. So I hope to introduce you to some new flavors today. We're going to go around the world a bit. We're going to be start out in the Mediterranean. We're going to head to Asia and end up, I don't know, where would that be? I think we're going back to the Mediterranean. But the fact is, we're going to use a variety of different ingredients in some of the same ways. So you'll see a little repetition here. And the whole idea is that if you're going to bake a lot of chicken, you can use it in ways where you'll kind of disguise it and your family won't know that it's chicken again. So let's start with a soup. The big thing about spring is that we have all been probably a little sluggish. Most of us are not as active in winter as we are in spring, summer, and fall. And one of the things is our body gets a little bit sluggish as well. So what we want to do is we want to restore and purify, detoxify. We want to get ourselves up and running. And the interesting thing is that the foods that are available in the spring, the first shoots of spring, are the best in terms of detoxification. So we're talking about things like scallions and chives and spinach and let's see what else, all the herbs, in fact, little radishes, so things that are pungent, things that are a little bitter, things that are going to cleanse us. And basically, they are mostly green. We're going to use a lot of herbs today, and some of these we're buying in the grocery store until we can grow our own. But hopefully you will be growing some herbs soon too. I'm using the Instapot just for two reasons. One, it's something that I can put together, press a button and leave, and then we can do something else, and I don't have to worry about scorching or boiling over. But you can do all of this on your stove at home in a big soup pot. So it's really the same thing. The other reason I'm doing it is because I know there are people out there who purchased an Instapot and it's still in your box. I know that. And so I want you not to be afraid of this thing. It is so convenient and easy to use, and the flavors really meld nicely. So I'm going to use the Instapot today. First thing is we're going to turn it on. So we press saute. It's going to get hot, and this is the nice thing about a multi-cooker is that it browns things, it cooks things the way to add flavor, which we're going to do with our onion, our garlic, and our mushrooms, and some spices. And then it also, of course, turns into a pressure cooker, so it saves you time. I'm going to put a little olive oil in here as we heat this up. And remember, we're always using extra virgin olive oil. And in the spring soup, and remember, this is kind of a lot of the things that come up in the spring, but you could turn the same soup into a summer soup using summer vegetables. We're going to always add some onions, and we use the red onion because of the anthocyanins, because of the quercetin, which is one of the very powerful antioxidants. We're starting to really understand that these foods are bioactive. They could actually affect change of our genetic patterns. And so this is really powerful stuff. We're using food as medicine here today. I'm going to let this start to saute. Another thing that we've talked about before is taking fresh garlic and mincing it and letting it sit for about 10 minutes while you're preparing other items. So let it mix with the air so that it can create a more powerful phytonutrient base. This one is called allicin, one of the active ingredients in the garlic. So onion and garlic are kind of our go-tos, and of course that triad of olive oil, onion, and garlic is very common and powerful and flavorful. Haven't heard this starting to sizzle yet. When it gets sizzling, I'm going to throw in some mushrooms. Today I'm using those little baby bellas. You can use any mushrooms. If you have some special mushrooms, you know, throw in some shiitake or some oyster mushrooms or any kind. But mushrooms are something that adds sort of a meaty texture, so you don't need as much meat. They do contain a bit of B12, so that is nice, and vitamin D3, which we also mainly get from sunlight, so that does contain a little bit of that. And as my grandmother said, don't really wash them, just brush them off, because you want that little bit of dirt. That's what gives you the B12, those little microorganisms that are in that tiny bit of dirt. My grandma lived to be 100, and she said everybody should eat a peck of dirt during their lives. And I think that was one of her secrets of success. So I'm going to add some onions. I have the onions sizzling. I'm adding some mushrooms. I don't want anything to scorch. I might just add a little bit olive oil. Remember, in the Mediterranean, where the men live the longest, and women too, olive oil is a staple, and up to 35% of their calories came from this particular fat, which we get plenty of fat in America, but most of our fats are not as healthy as the antioxidant-rich extra virgin olive oil. So I don't feel too guilty adding plenty of olive oil to my cooking. I'm not using butter, I'm using olive oil instead. Okay, so it's starting to sizzle. And another one of the ingredients we're using today, which makes it really nice for spring, is arborio rice, which is, of course, what we use for making risotto. So it's this kind of a fat, thick, starchy rice. And we're going to use that as sort of the carbohydrate base of a soup. Usually we put in noodles or potatoes or some kind of a grain. And today we're going to use arborio rice. So I'm going to put that in so it can kind of get coated with the olive oil, kind of mix in there. And now I'm going to do something really interesting for you. I want to introduce you to saffron. Saffron is the world's most expensive spice. In fact, it was said that Henry VIII forbade anyone to use saffron except him. But people being as sneaky as they are, the monks figured out a way to smuggle the crocus bulbs, which is where the saffron comes from. It has to be handpicked, and there's only 3 stems or 3 stamens in each of these fall blooming crocus. And so it is a very, very, very special kind of a herb or spice, I guess you would call it. It's very subtle, but it has a lot of wonderful flavor. So you only use a tiny pinch of this. And I put it in a mortar and pestle, but if you don't have a mortar and pestle, you can just use your fingers to crunch it up. And it has a lovely smell. It's really a wonderful, subtle smell. And now I've got this very orange powder, and you're probably wondering, what is she doing? And what I'm going to do is put a little water in there. And I want you to see that this forms this absolutely beautiful, it looks like a tempera paint, like this bright yellow orange paint. And that's what's going to go in here. You can hear it sizzle. I'm going to rinse it out a few times because I don't want to waste any of it. So this is the 3 stamens from the fall blooming crocus, creates this wonderful, wonderful, most expensive spice. And so it's often used in paella, kind of the saffron rice, the Spanish rice. Spain does grow it, as well as it's grown in the Himalayas, and now a little bit even in America. There are a few small crocus farms because it's something that is really appreciated. And I think as we get more and more gourmet in our tastes, we're asking for more of these unusual spices. So I'm putting some of this in there to simmer, and I've got a little chicken. One of the really easy ways to make life simpler for yourself is to cook a lot of something and then have it throughout the week, but disguise it. So I baked chicken. You could put it on the grill. You can roast it. You can put it in a frying pan, and you just want to cook chicken, and so that you have it, because now it can go on salads, it can go into soups, it can go into our Buddha bowl later. So I'm going to throw in some of this pre-cooked chicken. And you can also, of course, use a rotisserie chicken that you have kind of pulled apart and saved as well for convenience. You don't have to cook the chicken yourself. The benefit of a home-cooked chicken is going to have a little less sodium, though, so that would be one reason to do a home one. So now we want to add some broth. So I'm going to add about 3 cups of water here. And I'm going to throw in my Better Than Bouillon chicken paste. Remember, we use half strength, so I put in about 4 cups of water, so I'm going to put in about 2 teaspoons. All right. Okay, so if you decide that you don't have saffron or you'd prefer not to use it, which is fine, another really good anti-inflammatory substitution is using some turmeric. So we can always throw in 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, and don't forget, if we use turmeric, we want to also have some black pepper in there. I'm going to put some black pepper in anyway because it always adds flavor to our soup. But the two go together, the curcumin in the turmeric with the piperine in the black pepper, makes it 2,000 times more bioavailable. So the helpful ingredient in the turmeric is better absorbed with a little black pepper. Now, other herbs and spices could be used too. I always love Mural of Flavor. There's Tuscan Sunset. There's a lot of different combinations that Penzies has put together that are salt-free that also can be used in a soup. And so I'm just going to put just a little of this, but it's really not that necessary if we're going to use our fresh salsa verde on top. Just to kind of give you an idea that fresh herbs are also, of course, always enjoyed in soups like this, but you don't want to put them in until the end because they lose their flavor and even their therapeutic value. So the next step then is we're going to I'm going to turn it off, and we'll put on our lid. We make sure that we've got it sealed, and then we'll press manual. This time we're only going to go down for about 7 minutes, I believe, is what I had here. Is that right? Actually, I had it I'm going to go for 7 minutes. So we'll just do that because we want to make sure that the arborio rice cooks. But we're also going to be adding some asparagus and some fresh garden peas. These are your frozen peas, and some spinach at the end. But we don't, because they don't take very long to cook, we don't want to overcook them by putting them under the pressure cooker. So those are going to go in when we finish our cooking our soups. That will be in a few more minutes. So meanwhile, let's make that salsa verde. Now this salsa verde is a really very simple, very delicious, very powerful little sauce that I think is delicious just on plain, somewhat, bland protein foods like fish, for example, or on, again, a chicken breast. Or it's also really good on eggs, or delicious with a mushroom dish, or what have you. Actually, this thing is very, very versatile. Any kind of meat can be dressed up, or poultry or seafood, with this salsa verde. It's also something that I think you could be really creative and even put it on things like noodles and rice and baked potatoes. So in order to make this, I got this recipe idea from a gal who used to work at one of the well-known restaurants out in Berkeley, and Tamara Adler, and she wrote this book that is amazing. If you get a chance to read it, it's called The Everlasting Meal. And she talked how you make something like you make some meat, and then you want to put something on it to give it flavor, so you make the sauce, and then you go from there to something else, to something else, to something else, and so the meal never ends, or the whole process and the whole enjoyment of life through your meals and your cooking never ends, because you see one thing and then creatively you jump into the next. And I love that philosophy. So let's make some salsa verde. Now the beauty of a salsa verde is that you just chop stuff. You don't really need to have a blender or any kind of a special appliance. So I am using some beautiful parsley. I've got some lovely parsley here. We could throw in all kinds of things. This is rough chopped parsley, basil. I do have some basil in here with it. This is the basil leaves. So you just kind of rough chop your herbs. Got about a cup of them. And now we're going to mix in some garlic, which I do have over here. Garlic is just about universally enjoyed, so I'm going to throw in a clove of garlic here. And let's put in some, this one has anchovy paste. So this is the umami flavor. When you think about it, food that tastes really good has about 5 flavors in it, 5 or 6, depending on where you're kind of going from. But in America, we love sweet and we love salty. So you see a lot of sweet and salty, but generally we forget about the others. And of course, they are things like tart. So we have lemon here, or vinegar, or we use yogurt to give sort of a sense of tartness in foods. Then there's also the pungency, and the pungency is coming from our onions, from our garlic, from our ginger, which we'll be using later in our Buddha bowl. And then there's a bitterness, and of course the bitterness is from the greens. That's another reason why we want to include greens at every meal, because these herbs, the spinach, the dark greens in the salads, all of this contributes a contrasting flavor, something that balances the sweetness. And then the last one that is often a Japanese one is umami. And umami is sort of that savoriness. So you can get anchovy paste. So that makes it really easy. You just put just a little squirt in here. It's not a whole lot. And you could also have some canned anchovies, cut them up very small, and also add them. We're using also capers, another thing that we don't usually think about too often, but something nice to keep in your refrigerator door. And these are basically just brined or pickled flower buds. And so we're going to use like about a tablespoon. So I'm just gonna try to guess about a tablespoon here. And the nice thing about capers, these are small capers. I don't need to really chop them up. A little juice goes in there too. That kind of gives it some of the flavor. And then we're going to put in our juice from our lemon. I got a couple of tablespoons of juice here. And we'll be putting in a little bit of olive oil. And that's about it. It's kind of this tart and slightly salty and pungent umami kind of a sauce. So you can see, because it carries so many different flavors in it, it's a great sauce to use. It's very versatile. It will stay in your refrigerator for about at least 5 days, so you can use it. I don't think it would freeze very well, so I wouldn't recommend freezing it, because that will sort of destroy the greens. And we need some olive oil. I'm just going to, see, about a quarter of a cup. There we go. All right. So this is kind of a pasty looking sauce. And you can chop things finer if you wish. You can put these into a food processor to make it very, very creamy if you want. But actually, just kind of the rustic nature of it makes it, to me, very appealing. I did just serve this to a friend recently, and she was blown away by it just because it just had so much flavor. And I just served it over just a plain chicken breast with some of this beautiful, show you this stuff. I have, I'll talk a little bit about purple rice. This is a really fun type of rice that you can use to make a beautiful bowl or a beautiful presentation. It is called purple rice, and it is this gorgeous black. It's also called forbidden rice. I don't know if you can see this, but it is really, really beautiful. I'm going to put a little bit on a plate and show you what this would look like. Okay. So we're going to have a little bit of this black rice. Look at how striking that is on that plate. And then if we take a chicken breast, I'm just going to put, this one is actually a little chicken thigh. And I have some pre-roasted vegetables here to show you as well. Took some broccoli, some red pepper, and some onion, and just roasted this for 15 minutes with a little olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper, and you would, have this pre-roasted so that you can heat all of this up. And just gonna show you how beautiful it is. Remember, what we're looking for is half the plate is vegetables. So there we are. Half the plate is vegetables. This is a mini plate. And now what I would do would be to throw a little bit of this special kind of a sauce over it. I'm probably drowning it in it, but it adds quite a bit of flavor. So this would be a really lovely, simple meal to make because you've already done so much in preparation for it, making your roasted vegetables when you have time during the weekend, perhaps grilling some meat, and then cooking a little excess rice or noodles or pasta or potato so that you have a very simple and elegant meal after a long days of work. And so that's kind of the way we're looking at this. Now, there's a lot of beautiful restorative foods in there too. We're thinking about the cruciferous broccoli, we're thinking about those onions and the garlic and all of those greens. The beauty of this rice is it's a whole grain rice, so it normally takes about 45 minutes to cook. In the pressure cooker, it takes about 22, so about half as much time. And it has kind of a nice chewy texture, which I think is very enjoyable. Let's see how our soup is doing. Okay, the soup is finished and we've allowed it to go into low for a few minutes, so there's less pressure released, but we still need to release the pressure. And as I mentioned, we're going to cook a few extra vegetables in there because right now it's just the mushrooms, the onions, and garlic with a little chicken and some rice and the saffron flavoring. But we want to add the greens. This is what makes this soup really good. And this is also the way that I hope that you'll see making soup is always adding extra vegetables. So you might, instead of saying got milk, you might say got veggies, because whatever you have is probably a good option. Our goal is to get more fiber into our diet. Most Americans get about 10 to 13 grams of fiber, and we're looking for 25 to 30. So we really need to boost our fiber intake, and the way to do that is more plant foods. And of course, as I'm going to turn this off, and now I'm going to saute, so I'm going to get it hot again, and we're going to throw in some asparagus, which is one of those detoxifying vegetables that just spikes out of the earth in the springtime. What's lovely is that all the foods that are seasonal in the spring are the ones that we're actually wanting more of. I'm going to put in some peas. Now, some people don't like peas, if I recall, and you'll have to pick out the peas if you don't like peas. And the rest is some greens. And the easiest greens to use, the one I mostly recommend, is spinach, just because it's very mild. You can buy a baby organic spinach and you just toss it in just about anything at the end. So I'm actually going to wait a minute till this starts to simmer, and then I'm going to throw in my spinach. So this soup is already quite flavorful. It doesn't need a lot of extra because we did put in either some turmeric or some saffron. We added a little bit of French herbs, or the Penzi combination herbs. But the other thing that you can always do is add a little bit of that salsa that we made. And I'm going to do that because it's going to bring it up another notch, giving it a little bit of extra, I don't know, it makes it feel like you're in a special restaurant and you didn't do anything that difficult. Having parsley and cilantro, I usually keep them on the windowsill in little vases so that I remember to use them, and also to keep them fresher. And that whether it's a Mediterranean or an Asian dish or a Greek or Mexican, it fits with our desire to add more greens. And of course, these are these bitter greens that are high in nutrients, concentrated nutrients. So don't think of them just as a pretty face. You really want to use them and keep them handy. Start to simmer. Asparagus is going to only take like 3 minutes, and the peas, frozen peas, again, a couple of minutes. So we're starting to see that simmer, and the rice is cooked. It's got this beautiful color. I'm going to show it to you when I'm finished here. I think I'm just going to throw in the greens. You can put in a lot more green than you think. Whatever you think you should put in, put twice as much, because it will wilt into just about nothing. Now this soup looks very hearty. Another way to use spinach is to throw it into your pasta water right before you're going to drain your pasta, and that way you will have a vegetable that you didn't even have to chop. You didn't have to use a separate bowl. You don't have any extra cleanup, and it was super easy. And it can be hidden by the sauce if there are people in your family who don't like green stuff, but you know that you're adding something beneficial. Lots of folate, lots of magnesium, lots of calcium and iron in these green vegetables. Also, we don't think about it, but they are the source of omega-3 fats, which are the anti-inflammatory fats. So I'm going to turn this off now, and I'm going to dish out a little bit so you can kind of see how beautiful this soup is. It's really thick and hearty. Another thing to add onto it would be a little bit of Parmesan cheese, which we can do, but I also want to put some of our little salsa verde. This is that magical sauce that you can put on almost anything throughout the week that you make it. So I'll put just a little bit of that in there. Remember, it has kind of a lemony, garlicky, umami flavor to it. And just because we're here and we happen to have some Parmesan cheese, I'm just going to put just a sprinkle on it. Notice that we're not using a lot of creamy, rich dairy foods. We're not using a lot of extra fats. I grew up in a family that used a lot of cream of mushroom soup, a lot of casseroles. And what we want is the consistency of that creaminess. Oops, let's turn this off. We want the creaminess. We want the sensation of food that isn't dry, but we want to do it without all that excess kind of fat and sodium. So I'm going to taste this. Grab a little spoon. I'll show you just how pretty it is, if you can see it. This is a meal in itself, and remember, very little chicken in here. It's mostly the veggies and the rice. Oh wow, that's powerful. It's good. I can really taste the lemon in there, and it's very rich. You can also, a subtleness from the saffron. So, very, very nice.